Hello friends to the world of books. Today the book that we have chosen for review is Thank You for Being Late. Well, of course, the very title of it suggests the interest that it carries. Normally you're sorry if you're late, but the author has certain reasons to thank his friends why they were late. That'll come a bit later. First, a little bit about the author. Author's earlier work was The World is Flat. Thomas Friedman is a New York Times columnist and a world-known author, American author, who writes about technology and about current affairs. And if Thomas Hobbes, that great philosopher, he was known for three words, the expression that's made by nasty, brutish and short, that the world was then. To Thomas Friedman, the world now is hot, flat and crowded. That forms the title of his another book. So earlier known for his two books, The World is Flat and Hot, Flat and Crowded. Now the new book of Thomas Friedman that we are going to discuss today is Thank You for Being Late. The great thing about this book is that it's not actually a discourse against technology, certainly, because Thomas Friedman symbolizes, he represents, he takes us into the depth of that great technological change that has taken the world by surprise, and the greatest revolution so far that has happened in human history. In fact, he teaches us how to grapple with these challenges that technology has posed and has set in front of us. The book has 4 units. The first is reflecting, the second is accelerating, the third is innovating, and the fourth is anchoring. The first, reflecting. I begin with a line. It's not from this book. It's from a book that's titled When the Heart Waits. That can go as an epigraph. Waiting provides the time and space necessary for grace to happen. And the second line, rest is just as holy as work. Now see the comparison between the rest and the work. So that is why I chose these lines that will do like two epigraphs to the note on the book, the main book by Thomas Friedman. Thomas Friedman in the very beginning pages of the book makes a very subtle difference between human mind and a computer mind, the mind of a machine and the mind of a human being. Friedman actually quotes his friend and teacher, again a known researcher and a writer on technology, Dov Seidman. He writes, when you press the pause button on a machine, it stops. But when you press the pause button on human beings, they start. Therein lies the difference. That is what he calls as reflection. What comes from the heart enters the heart. That's called reflection. When empathy begets empathy, when care begets care, that's called reflection. And reflection is something that's badly missing in an atmosphere, in a world when we are being hugely bombarded by so many sources of information from all sides. And that is the real worry of acceleration that Thomas Friedman talks about in detail in his book. Author talks actually about what we can call as attention crisis, because our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We get very, very little time to reflect. So that justifies the title. Actually, there's a very small story behind the title. Thomas Friedman says that when he was waiting, his friends get late. And when his friends arrive, some of the friends says that I got late because I got stuck in a jam. The other says that I got late because there's some other reason. But Friedman says that, why are you sorry for being late? Actually, I have to thank you for being late, because by the time you reached, you gave me some time to reflect, to think, to ponder. That is something that counts as a blessing in this time of speed and acceleration. So there he gets the title for his book, Thank You for Being Late. Because while researching for his book, he had to interview some people many times over and over and over again, because by the time he would catch that information would get obsolete. Then he would go to the next respondent, then catch the next information, and by the time he will put that information in his book, that data will go obsolete. So by the time you take this ice to your home, it doesn't reach as ice, it turns water. So that is the biggest thing, the biggest challenge in this age of technology. So that is the first unit of the book, Thank You for Being Late. In the same unit, what Friedman suggests us are some creative ways to deal with this monster of speed and with the abundance and with the overarching effect of technology around us. What he asks us to do is to widen our aperture so that we can synthesize more and more perceptions. With patience, ultimately is not the absence of speed. Patience to him is the space for reflection and thought. So that's why he asks us to widen a bit your aperture so then more and more things can go in. No matter we face difficult challenges, but nothing in life is to be feared. It's only to be understood. That's a takeaway, that's the real thing that this book teaches, that now is the time to understand more so that we can fear less. Now, the second unit of this book is accelerating. Acceleration or speed has been a perennial theme for poets, for philosophers, for historians, and earlier they would do a comparison between the East and the West by saying that East doesn't change and West changes all the way through, minute to minute. As the great poet of Urdu, Iqbal, in one of his famous verses said, Zamir Maghrib hai tajirana, Zamir Mashriq hai rahibana, Wahan digar gun hai lahza lahza, Yahan badalta nahi zamana. That the core of the West is based in market, is steeped in market. The core of the East is steeped in cave. There it changes every moment, here it doesn't change at all. But that definition of East and West is now flat because technology has rendered it flat. Now the East and the West change every moment, every time, again and again, over and over, courtesy technology. That definition had roots in history, in anthropology, in civilization. This definition has its roots in technology. So Thomas Friedman, he begins this section with the year 2007 because he calls this year as the vintage year of history. The speed of technology is so fast because earlier we had agriculture age when things would move at a very snail's pace for hundreds of years together. Then we were into industrial age when things did change at a relatively faster pace than the agriculture age, but still not as fast as it is happening in the age of technology, where things change not just in years or months or in weeks or in days, they just go on changing and we are not able to meet that speed. That's the reason that he says that 2007 was a vintage year of history, because that was the year when, according to Friedman, machines were made to compete, connect, and collaborate. When Facebook didn't exist, I'm talking about before 2007. It's not BC. It's not, it's not a medieval age. It's just a few years, less than 2 decades earlier, when Facebook did not exist. When Twitter was just a sound, when Skype was considered as a typo, when cloud had no other meaning except cloud itself. These now are called as good old times. It's not the time of our forefathers, it's the time that we have lived in and we have traveled through. Today, given the speed that we have, it looks like a medieval age. Thomas Friedman begins with Gordon Moore's law. The real origin from where the speed arises. Moore's law is simple. One rice grain on a chessboard, you double it, and then you go on multiplying and see what happens. It has a snowballing effect. First we had megabytes, and then we traveled over to gigabytes, and now we are into terabytes and over to who knows what next. That is the race, that is the pace of the speed that we are caught in. Now humans have become a force of nature that are changing the planet at a pace never so fast in human history. Now the challenge is how to strike a balance. That question is answered in detail by Friedman. Now the author says that I have a trick for you. In fact, I will refer you to somebody who can do it for you. Friedman says, and that's a brilliant way of saying it. That's a creative way. You will really love it. The way he refers you to someone who can do it for you, who can control this change, who can stabilize you. Author says, I know a woman who can sustain this balance for you. And the woman has been doing it for 3.8 billion years. Guess who? There's a woman. And author says the name of that woman is Mother Nature. And Mother Nature loves being late. So you don't have to hurry, you don't have to keep pace with everything that's going on around you. Just relax, lean back, rest, wait, make some grace to happen, because that is what Mother Nature demands. Thomas Friedman says that 20th century, the century gone by, that went into saving Mother Nature from people. But this 21st century will go in saving Mother Nature for people. See the difference. Because Mother Nature is now under threat. That Mother Nature is to be saved for people. Because our own race is endangered because of those changes that technology, that climate change has brought about. So Friedman says that there is only one person or one thing or one character, whatever you like to call it, that is Mother Nature. Mother Nature can save you. Because the challenge is too huge, too immense. It's not just this, that we are getting fascinated by new gadgets, by the new pace, by the new things, by the new consumption epidemic that all of us are becoming a victim of. There are certain things that we consider that if they are not saved, if they are not stored, if they are not somehow produced or created or recreated, the entire human race will face such a big challenge. And Thomas Friedman says that we could rebuild Europe after World War II. And to Friedman, that was much easier. We could rebuild economy after the Great Crash. That again to Friedman was a little easier. But once we overstep limits of Mother Nature, Friedman says we can never rebuild the things we destroy here, because once destroyed is always destroyed. It's not that theory of replenishing the recreating the natural resources, because we are banking, we are hanging, we are spending on our savings. As Friedman in one of his earlier books, The World is Flat, or somewhere in Hot, Flat and Crowded, also that idea echoes, that we are actually living or spending the credit card that belongs to our generations. So that is how we are destroying Mother Nature. Now Thomas Friedman says that Mother Nature has what he calls as killer apps, what Thomas Friedman calls killer apps. These killer apps are adaptability, diversity, entrepreneurship, ownership, sustainability, bankruptcy, federalism, patience, and topsoil. These are Mother Nature's killer apps. And he suggests us to convert these killer apps into human politics. But given all mercy that Mother Nature is known for, we must never forget, and he warns us, that Mother Nature is brutal. Mother Nature. You know, she's compassionate, she can save us, but at the same time, the way we have waged a war against Mother Nature, don't forget that Mother Nature at the same time is merciless. So that is the lesson that goes in the second part of this book. And over to the third one, that is titled as Innovating. Friedman carries on the same theme of speed. But here he talks about, and here he takes us a little ahead, and he gets us into the different realms of our practical life. He says that education will change its meaning. The employment will change its meaning. Because earlier what we would call as digital divide. Friedman says that digital divide is past. Now what we are facing is motivational divide. It's been replaced by that. Because in this age, learning is more important than knowing. Earlier we would say that if we don't know, But now we say that if we don't learn to know, that's how the employment, the job market, the learning, the teaching, everything is going, is suffering or is experiencing a radical change in itself. So Friedman stresses the need to widen the scope of learning, not for just individuals, but for nations, for corporate heads, for politicians, for heads of the states. The key lies in the learning, because we can't always curse our luck because we have been thrown behind. We have to curse ourselves. And he gives the allegory of a golfer, that if you're not able to hit your ball, the problem does not lie with your stick or with your ball. The problem lies with you. It's your responsibility to learn the newer things so that you can meet the newer challenges that are offered to you. So that is how he says that the scope of learning is actually the whole thing. Learning is all. If Shakespeare said ripeness is all, Friedman may, though he doesn't mention Shakespeare in that context, that Friedman may say that learning is all. Friedman further explains and then devises some ways, some means to meet this challenge. Again, that's what Friedman calls that it's just too damn fast, because at today's rate of progress, he says, 21st century will be equivalent to 20,000 years of progress. Imagine. What do we do? Now there's a challenge. Should we press the pause button? No, not here. He sets two options, that should we stop the speed, or should we increase our speed to match the speed of the progress? I have a small example, and by means of that I understand this phenomenon. There's a horse and a horseman. The horse is too slow and the horseman is worried about the slow pace of his horse. He feeds it with a steroid. Now the horse gets faster. Now horseman faces a speed that the horse is too fast. Now what does he do? He takes a steroid of a bigger dose but doesn't feed it to the horse, takes it himself. Why? Because he must be always one step ahead of the horse. Horse must follow him, not that the man will follow the horse will follow the man. So the same thing applies here. How do you balance a fast technological process with a relatively slower sense of humanity? That's the challenge that Friedman puts, and that is the solution that Friedman suggests. Now, the solution is what? Friedman coins a term as a solution, that the term is called dynamic stability. He gives the example of a kayak. You know, there's a sport that's called kayaking. When you're in a fast rowing boat, you don't have to stick your paddle. You don't have to stick your kayak. Sticking your kayak means that your boat will come to a halt. No, that's not to be done. This whole thing is not to be stopped. Friedman asks us to adjust yourself to the speed so that you don't crash against the wave. Stopping is no solution at all. We have to learn to have a balance between physical technology and social technology, the two terms that Friedman coins. What is physical technology? Physical technology is simple. That's the technology of gadgets and the progress that is happening in the world. Every day, every week, every month, our gadgets get a bigger, higher speed at a much cheaper, faster rate. But what is social technology? The normal technology we understand. But the social technology is the bulwark. That is the defense against that fast changing technology that is too blinding. Social technology, as Friedman puts, is the rule of law. Social technology is social institutions. Social technology is ethics. It's the social structures. That is the embodiment of all these things put together, the strengthening of all these institutions that Thomas Friedman puts as social technology, because we have to run parallel to the change. We don't have to stop the change from happening. That's not possible and that's not desirable. That phenomenon of marrying social technology to physical technology will stabilize us, and that phenomenon Thomas Friedman calls co-evolution. That's a beautiful term. There's a new social contract. In fact, this is Rousseau revisited. You know, we are redefining the rules of employability of this age. Now, you know, we have to live in this human capital where everything is driven by market forces, by technology. So Thomas Friedman suggests us certain things, that how to restore yourself the balance, how to take rest also, how to do work also, how to learn also, how to unlearn also. It's not all about learning the new, it's also about unlearning the old. So here are 3 key social contracts which Thomas Friedman talks about. The first one is between workers and employees, just see. The second is between students and institutions, and the third one is between citizens and governments. Now see this contract and understand it and explain it and describe it in such a way so that there's a harmonious relationship between the social technology and the physical technology. There's a great upheaval. In fact, there's a great surge, a new phenomenon that is taking world by surprise, and that we never know that the things that it's going to do in future. That phenomenon is called AI, artificial intelligence. Earlier, machines competed at a manual level with human beings. Now they will compete at a cognitive level. That's what artificial intelligence is all about. Now, meeting the challenge of artificial intelligence, that's called AI, Thomas Friedman suggests us something really very interesting. He reverses the words. He says that you can meet AI with IA, that he calls it intelligent assistance, because actually artificial intelligence is not the master, that has got to be your slave. The same relationship between the horse and the horseman, the same relationship between the master and a slave as to who drives whom. Artificial intelligence should not drive a human being. A human being has to drive artificial intelligence. That is why he says that this AI, artificial intelligence, is to be converted into what he calls it intelligent assistance. And what is intelligent assistance? It is the interface between humans and their tools. AI is creating your own knowledge and inventing your own career. That is how Thomas Friedman phrases the long and short of artificial intelligence, that how to meet that challenge also. Because we have to ultimately understand the concept of freedom in the age of technology. What he stresses is that we don't have to get enslaved by technology. Rather, we have to come over and mount it and ride it and turn it to the best possible use for humankind. So Friedman calls this phenomenon of imbalance as inequality of freedom. You know, Russians would say it's easier to turn an aquarium into a fish soup than to turn a fish soup into an aquarium. That's the gross inequality. Now Friedman talks about two freedoms here. It's not the clash of freedoms, it is the difference of freedoms. One is called freedom from, and the other is called freedom to. Freedom from is a process that's far quicker, but freedom to takes time. Those who will read that book will find in detail as to how he expatiates on, or how he dwells upon these two different concepts of freedom from and freedom to. That has been discussed by earlier philosophers as well, but he talks about these two concepts in technological and in social context. Like Friedman says that social media is good for collective sharing, it's good for collective building, and he says it's good for collective destruction, but it's not good for collective construction. That's what Thomas Friedman says about the pace, the blinding pace that social media has come for. Because of speed and brevity, as he puts, that we write our opinion in just 140 characters on such complex world affairs. That is what we do right now. We write an opinion in a line, in 2 lines, in characters. So the concept of freedom needs to be more nuanced. It's not that plain. It's not the freedom of just coining a slogan. It has to be more subtle, it has to be more nuanced, it has to be full of shades. It's not about the freedom of extremes, it is about the 50 shades of grey that come in between. The age of acceleration, as is mentioned in this book, it will be a graveyard, as worries Thomas Friedman, for big ideas. The ideas have gone missing in this speed, and that's a worry. That is why he thanks his friends for being late, because ideas were going missing, and he was into retrieving those ideas that had gone buried somewhere in the maze and haze of this abundance or speed. And that perhaps is the reason that makes Thomas Friedman call internet as an open sewer of untreated information. What a phrase! That's a beautiful way of defining. That's certainly not going against the changes or the great things that internet has come in its wake, the greatest revolution in human history. But see how Friedman phrases it, as a sewer of untreated information. But what he suggests is that we need to treat it well. If it's untreated, we have to treat it well. It's not the problem with the internet, it's the problem with the use of the internet. That is where the point of authentication or veracity or filtering comes. And he says that earlier, if it would take a village to raise a child, now it takes a planet to do the same. Just imagine, because the birth of a baby is not just the birth of an individual. It's the birth of a cosmos, because he carries a microcosm. He carries the symbol of that cosmos, because ultimately it's the whole climate that supports the birth of a baby. The fourth and the last unit of this book is called anchoring. It's not that usual marketplace or professional television or radio anchoring that we call. It's anchoring, finding your roots. That's called anchoring. The first thing that will make us anchor to the ground is what Thomas Friedman calls, he's got such a beautiful way of phrasing abstract concepts into simple and graceful things. See, how does he call it? He calls that anchoring a legal performance enhancing drug. What is that legal performance enhancing drug? That's called trust. And he says it's trust that will keep us anchored, that will keep us tethered to the ground. Once we lose that, we lose everything. More the world branches out, more we need to be anchored through this. What? Through this performance enhancing drug that's called the trust. Because ultimately trust is the glue that binds us in this age of pace and speed and abundance and plethora of things. We have to trust each other. Because technology has created some issues of trust, of suspicion, of endangering of our privacy as human beings. So ultimately we will have to place our reliance on each other. What more will keep us anchored? Friedman says, apart from trust. In Friedman's words, there are certain things we can't download. And that is the key point that we need to understand as students of technology. In Friedman's words, there are certain things that we can't download. The high five from a coach, the praise from a mentor, the hug from a friend, the hand up from a neighbor, the handshake from a rival, the totally unsolicited gesture of kindness from a stranger, the smell of a garden, and not the cold stare of a wall. These things are completely irreplaceable. And if technology gives us anything, he says that I don't need icons on the Facebook. I need friends. I need those friends who I can see and be with, whose company I can enjoy not on the screen as a small window or a mugshot, but whose company I can share, who can sit with me, talk to me face to face. That is how he says that there are certain things which technology can't replace. There are certain things that you can't download friendship. You can't download company. Of course, you can have virtual company, but virtual company in no way, by no means, is the replacement to the real company that you can enjoy as human beings. Now, Thomas Friedman shifts his attention to America, and he says that there are diseases and diseases, But the biggest disease today in America is not cancer, it's isolation, which makes anchoring impossible. And Friedman also has a solution to this. Friedman portrays Minnesota, his own place, as a sample of that humanity he craves for. To meet this global challenge, he offers this, what he calls as interesting. Again, he calls it as a refresher course. This is a refresher course for humanity, and see how he phrases that, how he explains that refresher course. Friedman says, I needed to go back and reconnect to that time and place in my life where politics worked, where community spirit was real, where public institutions were respected, where my friends were my friends, not followers on Twitter or icons on Facebook. The author is in search of a real world that goes in harmony with the virtual world. He is neither an optimist nor a pessimist, and he says both are forms of fatalism. What he believes in, he calls it applied hope. So let us apply that hope to the world we live in. Though the post-corona world, the post-COVID world poses some great threats, some great challenges to us, and it seems that the real world may now be replaced by the virtual world, but the reality stays and stays forever. Since this book, Thank You for Being Late, has been written before COVID erupted, before world was taken over by corona, but it will pose some new questions, it will pose some new problems, but still the themes that are everlasting are really everlasting. The last message that Thomas Friedman gives is that be tethered to a place called home, and don't worry if that gets you late. So finally, we are back to homes. At least this bit gets true, that in post-corona crisis, all of us wish each other a line, a message that is stay home, stay safe, and stay blessed. That's what Friedman suggests. That's what we suggest. Thank you very much.